connecting. And I think that's the value proposition of diversity. It's uncomfortable, and that discomfort creates more power, more value, more space. When you're surrounded by people that are all like you, you're going to think just like them, and you're going to just create stuff just like them. And that's okay. But if you're looking for growth, if you're looking for to just grow or sell or do something different within your space, you have to diversify, right? You have to get different viewpoints. People see the world differently. For example, culturally, I think just there are cultural differences. Here in the US, we are very independent. It's me first, what's in it for me. But that's not how the world is, right? That's not how every culture is like. And so when you bring in different viewpoints, when you bring in people that come from cultures where it's a collective or it's a we first, they see the world a little bit differently when it's not centered around just themselves. So I think one disadvantage or one flaw is when Amazon is about customer-centric. What is the customer, right? And if the customer is a very narrow segmentation, then you are not creating the right offering. And I think whatever space that you are working on, if your view of your customer is not diverse, then whatever you're creating is really targeted to one narrow segment. And I think in order to succeed in this world, in order to see the world differently, let's repivot and change what we see and what we hear, think, feel, do around the customer, the person. And that changes how you market, that changes how you sell, changes our strategies. So I think I'm going to get into this meeting, but lots of good conversations to follow, lots of good stuff. I got the podcast recorded. There's the setup. And now I have to register and put it into directories. I'm using this service called Buzzsprout to host the website podcasts. And I've done it before with Anchor. And what I like about Anchor is just it does it's really automated. It's super easy. With this Buzzsprout, what I have to do is submit my show to all these services like Stitcher and Apple, Google. The list goes on. And each one has their own process, and each one now I have like 15,000 links to work on. So a bit of a pain, but I get to own my own podcast versus going to rather than going to Anchor, which owns it. So I guess it's a philosophical discussion. It's a philosophical discussion on whether you use a platform like Anchor, put stuff on Medium, so on and so forth. And so this is a bit of a pain, but I guess I get to control it. So right now I got my show, and I'm trying to add to Stitcher. And I'm trying to find the link to it, which is incredibly complicated. So, all right, we'll see how I do. Okay. No, let's power through this. 1980. There we go. That's the downside of doing this yourself. So now you got to figure it out. Oh, okay, I need. So here's the plan. I have my podcast hosted on Buzzsprout, which is kind of like a self-hosted function. Then I need to submit my podcast RSS feed, really simple syndication feed, to Stitcher and wait for their approval, which could take 2 weeks. Once I get approval, I sync it back. So that's for one service. And let me go back. So I submitted to Apple Podcast. I'm listed on Spotify. I submitted to Google Podcasts. I did Stitcher. Let's see. I want to do TuneIn and Alexa. Okay, here we go. So now I'm going to create an account in TuneIn. Okay, entering email, my podcast. This is why people don't create their own podcasts, because this is why I think a lot of people should just use Anchor, because it's automated, but I'm a control freak, so I want things to work. What else is this? Language. That's a weird way. Okay, language is in English. Each one just has a bajillion forms they want you to fill out. It feels like a government submission, but okay, here we go. So I submit in TuneIn. I'm going to wait, and I guess I come back and I re-upload each one of these ones. And let's see, any more? Do I want to be on Pandora, iHeartRadio, Listen Notes? There's all these. Man, it's like. Okay, so there it is. That's the process. I will wait and try to get listed in all these podcast services, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, I'm going to hit record, and it says unable to start recording, failed health checks. Let's see. All tracks must have received. There's some issue going on your end. Let's see, sample. Hi. I'm here. Hello. Yes, I used to do communications for a consulting firm, and so I did this before COVID. It paid off. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining. I definitely appreciate you connecting. And yes. Yeah, so I want to think about both ways. Let me give you a little bit of context. I am independent, and then I partnered up with my former business partner, and she runs this thing called the Government Joy Network. So I was kind of drawn to kind of the work that you do. Your joy in general, and so we are trying to bring joy specifically to government, which is the opposite of joy, right? I think that's. I mean, you would just be. I would tremendously be indebted just with that one, but. And conversely, I don't want this to be a one-way relationship. So I'm looking at your book and I'm looking at some of your offerings. I'd like to conversely share that with our audience as well. It's smaller, right? Because it's very niche in government. But I think just getting exposure to stuff outside of what they normally see, kind of the work that you're doing, which is kind of unique and is very very aligned in kind of the messaging that we're doing so far. Well, I think buried within government, there's people like you, right? And there's people like me that want something more, and they work there not because it's just a job. Like for some people, it's a mission, right? Like in government, you can do a lot of great, amazing things, but people are locked away, and just the environment just doesn't have that joy. Again, government joy, right? And I think one day it'd be amazing to have kind of a speaker like you to come join in these types of audiences, kind of getting you into that space where people just feel like it's a dead job, right? And if we just make people happier, give them the ability to express themselves, be themselves, then I think the DMV won't be a horrible experience, right? Whew. So my car is dead. Has something to do with the transfer case, and so like that alone is probably a $4,000 repair, and I have deferred maintenance. That's probably another $3,000. Need new tires and everything. All up, we're talking about like $8,000 of repairs on a car that's 2007, so 13 years old. So it's gone. We just went out and got a cheapo Prius to get us through this, and that's just temporary. So a little setback. There's always setbacks. Yeah, had a great conversation with Jillian, who's just a random person I met on Twitter, and I think I gotta do more of that. There's just really, really cool, amazing people on the internet. So just making more connections and just expanding myself, trying to figure out where the connection points are. So got one more call, and I'm gonna try to call it a day. Yeah. That'd be awesome. So maybe I'll just give you the elevator spiel or about a 30-second little thing about my past. And I spent about 15-year career consultant. So I spent the first half in public sector consulting, state and local. And then at that point, I made a strategic decision to switch to private consulting and into business because I didn't want to just peg myself as a public sector person. And I spent the last 8 years or so at a company called Point B. That's where Pam and I met. And so I cut my chops in project management, program management. My background has always been in change management, but when I came to Point B, I intentionally said, I don't want to touch it. I want to stay focused on learning project management because that was my weaker side. And then towards the latter half, I started leaning heavily back again on change management, and it started just developing different skills in communications. And so I ran comms for the company for a while, and for Point B, yep. And just, let's see if I have an example here. I did a read count. I made like 40 corporate videos. Yeah, so just like different videos for leadership communications, and a lot of it is just self-taught, self-learned. And so I would say if I were to just summarize myself, I'm more of a technical person first, right? So my background is more in technical change management, data analysis, and then I have a very strong creative bent, and so that's a unique combination for me. So I'm going to end the week with, this is vlog number 24. I might be on 25. I think I'm going to stop at 25, so that's next week. I'm going to finish up 25, and then I'm going to switch styles because this has been a learning experience, a good journey. But I don't want to just keep repeating the same thing indefinitely, so I think moving on, next week I'm going to do one final transition to more of a personal documentary. So I'd like to up my filmmaking game quite a bit and switch to a documentary style, and less about just talking to the video, because I will have a podcast for that. I created a podcast for 1980, but I wanted to switch to just a documentary on building this business and what it's about. So it'll be released less frequently, but the quality is going to be much improved, and I'm going to start building in better storytelling, better cinematography, and just more tight editing to make sure that the final product is of great quality. So check out my podcasts. I think I'll put a link in the description. Talk to you soon.